Okay, it's going straight to stream.
Okay, let me just refresh that and see if it's landing at YouTube.
Can I broadcast?
No, hang on.
Okay.
Give us a sec.
Yeah, I'll just be one tick. Just going to shut the door.
Right, it's not landing at the... Okay. Okay, let's see if that's gone live. I don't think it has.
I can get Sam to go in if you want while we broadcast. Live on Cook. Okay.
Okay. Oh, okay, well, it's not landing with us. So if Sam can go in and do that, that would be amazing.
Okay. Broadcast.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Have a good show.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Oh, let's get my picture up. I can't see you. It's let me start then. Fantastic. I'm not sure this ever gets any easier, but it's amazing to have you here. The series we're talking about today has been a total lockdown phenomenon, branded a modern masterpiece, breaking all iPlayer records, and it's already in talks about going to a second season, having only just gone to air, which I think is amazing and speaks volumes about the quality of it. It's, of course, the BBC Hulu's Normal People, and with me today is the opening series DP, Suzie Lavelle BSC ISC. Welcome, Suzie.
Hi, how are you?
There's an intro. Now you've got to follow we've got to follow up the intro. It's amazing to have you here. I appreciate it. I watched this series, and you know, obviously in the past couple of weeks, all in a bit of a rush, just because it was so compelling. It's beautiful work. It's stripped down, literally, elegant and beautiful in its simplicity, gripping and engaging. I wonder, of course, it starts with the story and the writing. How did you first come across it? How did you get involved?
Well, I was working on a show called World on Fire, and we'd just come back from Prague, and we were in Manchester, and an email came. I hadn't spoken to my agent for a little while because of being busy, and an email came through with a few jobs on it, and right at the bottom I saw BBC 3 half-hour episodes, but then I noticed Lenny's name, and rang my agent straight away and was like, what's that? Lenny Abrahamson's directing. He's a director that I would have, you know, followed avidly my whole career, and his films were really important to me when I was learning filmmaking. So yeah, I jumped on it as soon as I'd saw it in the email, found out as much as I could. And the scripts, quite quickly, I had a Skype interview with Lenny, having been given scripts 1 to 4. And I don't think I had time to get through the book because I was working before that Skype interview. So I was really going from the scripts 1 to 4. And then I had I think 2 interviews for it. The second one was in person, and by the time I had the second interview, I'd read the book and knew the material well. So that's how it came to me.
Okay. So you've read the book before as well. That's interesting because it's obviously. I mean, I've not read the book, but my wife and my daughter both have, and they immediately started as they saw the show that they obviously the characterizations are slightly different. Did you see that there was the slight difference in that, and how that was there a sort of discussion about that, or was it just part of the adaptation?
Yeah, not so much. I think it was just part of the adaptation. And for me, you know, being the cinematographer, and as soon as you get the scripts, that becomes your Bible. And then once I'd met the cast and attended rehearsals, that there was no other version of Marianne and Connell in my head once we'd started that process.
I mean, it's sort of, I guess it adapts itself for the screen, and that's what it's still, people have said, obviously, that it's still just as effective and and engaging, and I guess it's adapted to just to suit to filming or to character or to cast, or so I think it still does all the work. And you said you hadn't worked with Lenny before that.
No, never. It's someone I had on my sort of bucket list to work with for sure. No, but I knew his work well, I would say. Like, I'd seen his films a number of times, and, you know, anytime he had a new film coming out, it was, you know, super watched. And yeah, I was just a massive fan. So, and his type of storytelling and his authorship, I love that type of cinema. So, and also because of the type of stories he was telling from, you know, like say with Garage from the Midlands in Ireland, I hadn't really seen Irish stories told like that before, and so it was very big for me. It was when I was at film school I first watched that film, and I was so moved by it.
I mean, that's something that struck me from the outset is how Irish it feels. You know, it's very, you know, and I'm not stereotypical, but there's just something very, it's softly spoken and honest, and you know, there's not lots of explanation, and it's I don't mean Irish per se, but it feels this is just an authenticity to the language, I think, that just feels you know, it's not all these kind of monologuing, and it's just really gentle and beautiful, and I think that feels what makes it feel authentically Irish. Does that make any sense? I don't mean it's not meant to be offensive.
It's interesting as well, I guess, with Sally's writing as well, the way she sort of writes. She sort of writes in performance, like the detail she writes is absolutely what our characters do and what actors do, and yeah, I just find it such a like the way it portrayed their inner thoughts as so intelligently, and such a telling inner thoughts through performance. I thought she nailed, and the combination of Lenny then visualizing that was very exciting.
Let's talk about some references. I mean, what was your first conversation with Lenny about about the approach that he wanted to try with this?
Well, we talked a lot about his previous work. We kind of talked about everything in the interview, you know, like from what we were watching, what we liked, all types of filmmakers. And one of the things he brought up in the interview was a photographer from Ireland that lives in London that he knew the work of, called Enda Bow, who's this, who really writes, photographs beautiful work set in real life, all about character in real life, and specifically about that age of, you know, child into adulthood. And he's very cinematic. He does a mixture of portraiture, landscape, and sort of still life, I guess, that kind of creates a visual story in these sets of photographs. And he was saying to me he really loved that work, and that would I be up for meeting Enda, and it was someone he really liked, and so ended up meeting Enda in London and finding him amazing, and really falling in love with his work. And that's kind of where the visual references started, right? And his work's really honest and real, I suppose, and kind of largely based in portraiture. And then the rest of the references kind of happened in prep, where, you know, there was a number of things, finding the look of the show, and all of that, and also how we would handle the intimate scenes, and trying to find a language and a visual language that would help us get through that blocking and look wise. And so we ended up at Nan Golden, which was extremely useful reference that carried all the way. We even used to sit in the set with the actors, with the book Ballad of Sexual Dependency. The focus puller had an original copy of it, which he happened to be given by our editor, but years before on a separate job. which was amazing. And we would sit with the intimacy coordinator and Paul and Daisy, the first AD and the script supervisor, and sit with the book out and kind of just flick through it and talk about blocking and studies we could do, and, you know, body positions we could end up in. And because we were trying to find a way to be candid with that and quite frank with it. And yeah, it would just seem so appropriate. And that particular project of Nan Goldin.
Well, let's say hopefully we don't get in any trouble, but should we have a look at some of those, because you sent me some of your references earlier. Let's just let's see if I can open these up. Give us a second. Give us 1 second. This is going to be as elegant as we could possibly make it. Okay. Let's just go. So, I mean, as soon as you told me that these were your references, I mean, and then having spanned through, you know, looked at the series and done my own sort of taking images that really it struck me, is that these obviously, in terms of the lighting and the composition and the relationships between them, is so strong and plays out so beautifully. So yeah, I mean, these are so. I mean, they're just, it looks like the series, I have to say. It's fantastic.
And so helpful in terms of like being able to be free with them, you know, like present them to the cast and say, well, yeah, it just gave us such a good tool to be able to have a dialogue about what was good for me, what suited them, what, yeah. Like even loving that, the detail of the costume, you know, the way it's sitting and yeah. And the candidness, I guess.
Yeah, and it's sort of the, you know, and it actually does come back to the name of the piece, is that it's normal people. You know, it's not like it's not necessarily glamorized, but it's not. It kind of makes it into a work of art. But it's about normal. It's quite normal. They do it a lot. It happens on a single bed, and it's sort of not glamorous, but it's also they're so convicted to their intimacy that it's super beautiful. And then these were just some of your LUT references. So just in terms of your post coloring or some of your lighting, these were kind of some of your color and lighting references, right?
Yeah, like I guess for me it's important to have, I think there's about 10 images in this section, to have right from the outset, we sort of prepped this as where we were going to try and go with the LUTs, and I wanted to just have one LUT and it to be quite clear for all departments from the testing stage onwards that, you know, where the warms were going to sit, where the cools were going to sit. And also, I think with these, I couldn't get to see the colorist the first day after the camera tests, or the day before. So he designed templates based around these, and then we'd go and adjust after the camera tests once we had the costume actors, wall color, all of that. Yeah.
But there's something, you know, although these are quite stylized, there's something also about that, the kind of, which, I mean, we should look at some of Ender's work, but of the ordinariness to it. Is actually they're finding the beauty in the ordinariness, almost like Martin Parr kind of finding the beauty in the ordinary.
Which is what Ender's work absolutely does as well. Yeah, and finds the light and the story and the beauty in them. I think that's another Nan Goldin one, but I love that as a lighting reference.
Yeah,
in turn,
lots of beautiful shadows. But again, against the mundanity, you know, the fact that it's a beautiful thing, but against the a light switch and a brass handle, it's very beautiful. Cool.
And I guess the idea of in realism, you know, we can apply strong lighting and strong shadows and have contrast and be bold. Those photos would reassure me of that.
Well, I shall dig those out. Of course, the focus really is on our two star, you know, on kind of Marianne and Connell. What was the relationship like with them, and how? I mean, obviously that developed over time, but it had to get pretty intimate fairly quickly, I imagine.
Yes, yeah, it did. Like they were amazing. They're as amazing as you think they are. And, you know, I remember the first day I was invited to the rehearsal, and it was at the office, and I think it was the penultimate week, so not the week before, but the week before that. And Lenny'd been doing scenes, and he said, "Do you want to come in and see this scene?" And I went in to see it, and I think it was the first kiss scene, or perhaps the scene after that they played. And it was the first time I saw Paul and Daisy inhabit the characters, and it was just unbelievable. Like all those things that I tried to capture camera-wise, you know, Paul blushing on cue with a line, and the way his chin moved, and the way her eyes responded to him, that I felt like I was in the middle of someone's first kiss in the room, and I felt every bit of awkwardness and every blush. And I guess then it was like, how do I get that for truth on camera without being on top of them, without bringing the whole fuss of filmmaking into the room, keeping the rooms as clear as we can, and yeah, just trying to make it as honest and a place that they can move and play and follow their instincts in as much as possible, and leave the set as free as possible. So it was really all, like, the style was really dictated from seeing their performance and how Lenny was telling it, I suppose.
Right. I mean, so we super inhabit their world, don't we? So a lot of it is apart from the composition, it's that we really quite quickly come into, it's quite macro, isn't it? And we're super close to them. So it really becomes about, you know, the landscape of their faces, like you say, is and I guess the intimacy and the involvement that we have as a viewer kind of comes from the handheld as well. That kind of comes. So were there rules that you came up with that when we encounter them as people, or when they start to interact, were there kind of rules that you then would keep as particular for them?
So broadly, you know, we wanted to be as unobtrusive as possible, as much invisible filmmaking as possible, no unmotivated camera moves, all of that kind of stuff. But I guess in terms of our two leads, it was all about finding, you know, being able to exclude everything else but them, especially when they're in the public domain. So using the depth of field as a tool to knock the whole world out. And, you know, because really, you know, that kind of first love, if you go to school and the other person's there and you spent the night with them before and you can't make direct eye contact, but all you can feel is their presence and them looking at you and you looking at them, hidden glances. And so I guess the super shallow depth of field and that all that really mattered was each other, came as part of that building of visual language. And then when they're when they're on their own, sometimes the focus can go out and we see more of the room and more of the spaces they inhabit. But when they're together and in public, it's very narrow.
Which is beautiful. I mean, it adds the intensity. And I mean, I don't care where they are, because it's about them facing each other, isn't it? And really seeing each other. So it's kind of, so for me, the camera telling that, doing that part of the storytelling, I think that's what's so simple and strong with this, I think.
And also that problem of, like, how do you do the inner thoughts that Sally does in the novel visually? So it helps that, so that you can read things internally and the outward at the same time. I mean, that's a tricky thing with I found any work that I've done that's been an adaptation from prose to a script, or it hasn't been a problem, but you notice that obviously because there's a lot of internal stuff that happens in descriptions, and so you either have a voiceover, which is obviously very useful by reading those bits out, but then to translate that stuff. Did Sally do the adaptation? She did, with another, there was another writer as well called Alice Birch, who's another amazing person. I think she's a story editor on Succession, and amazing people in the story department.
It's of having to find a way of translating that prose into people just looking and thinking. So how you know, that's a challenge to show that. No, so in terms, you mentioned depth of field. What it sort of takes me quite neatly to camera and lens choice. What did you shoot this on?
We shot on K35s, so when I came to the project, we had a couple of things in our head. Initially, I was kind of hoping to shoot large formats, but we were with DNA lenses because I tested them at the Arri place in London, just gone to a group test and kind of fell in love with it and felt that the large format could give us something really interesting in terms of space and definition, even though it's very soft look. But then it became impractical. Really, the cameras weren't out till July. We started shooting in May. It would have been tight to get something that, and also there was a production worry about just the amount of data, and because we were quite on the fly, a small unit, and I didn't want to be in a situation where we were loading them, and then when it went to Mini, I sort of knew that I wanted it to be K35s and approached Lenny and said, look, I love these lenses. What do you think? And they did us a lot of favors in being super small, ergonomic, close focus. There's a 55mm that I don't think was easy to get for our hire house, but they did get it for us. And it's a beautiful lens, like very close focus and just beautiful size on the Alexa. I love it. So that became our sort of main lens. And if I'm operating and I'm handheld and I have K35s, you can do quite a lot with the way the aberrations in the lens and the way it reacts to light in terms of fill light, like a very little bit of flare can give you a bleeding flare when you've got a very dark image, and it can give you your fill. And so I think for the type of show we were, it was the perfect choice, to be fast, quick. I could cut corners where I needed to, knowing that I could steal the fill from the flare, and if that makes sense. But and also just the truthfulness that comes in the aberrations of those lenses mixed with simple lighting, like the biggest source you can outside the room, as far away as we can get it, and then being able to shift. And Lenny's very pragmatic about shooting in the way I could say, oh, look, that building's very hot across the road until 12. Can we look this way? And in the morning. So it was the perfect tool for us to be light on our feet and respond and be able to change. And also, sorry, I'm probably waffling in different directions a bit now.
Not at all.
We decided to not use low loaders at all on the job, and we wanted it, but partly just a time thing, the kind of fuss that, a low loading day can be very unsatisfactory for directors and DPs in terms of what you come out the other end with. And we just didn't want to spend too much time on it. So having the K35s in the Mini allowed me to be sort of in the back seat, wedged on the front seat with everything pushed forward, and pretty much get two eyes if I squished up enough and we cheated the seats a bit on the actors. So yeah, there was so many things that choice of lens and camera, it wouldn't have been the same without it.
I mean, it didn't feel like a huge budget production. It felt there's something about the intimacy of kind of two people, even though you did cover some ground with in terms of locations. But it feels like it's an indie kind of show in terms of its scale, and it felt like you were working with available and it feels something about the story and the whole narrative thrust of it is that it felt simple and it didn't need to be a huge production. It wasn't huge amounts of tricky lighting, or it just feels it. And is that what? And I guess that sort of lens package suits that. Is that what was that the case?
Yeah. I think very much so. More than anything, like, we wanted to be able to respond and have a truth to the work, and I think that I didn't want to get into that situation of having to move all of the equipment, all of the furniture out of the room to look this way. We wanted the actors to feel like they were, their characters were in the real world. And so I think, I'm trying to think budget-wise as well. Like, we did have the sort of lighting package I went for, because I tend to not like lights inside if I can avoid it, partly for performance and partly because they can look sourcey and it can become a bit faffy. And so I think our lighting budget was all about like 20Ks, T12s, 110K mole beam. And then I think all the small stuff pretty much was homemade wagon trains. I think we carried an S60 and an S30, but I don't think we used them much at all. Let's check with Garrett. But yeah, we didn't, except for maybe a bit of car stuff or yeah. So it was quite a refined package, small trucks. Yeah.
Well, it sounds like it suited it perfectly.
Yeah.
So you operated the whole thing, right?
Well, so the way we set it up was we knew we wanted a lot of Steadicam and we wanted really good Steadicam. And doesn't everyone? And that can be hard on a daily thing, especially in Ireland where it's busy. There's not that many operators. So we set the show up as essentially a single camera show, and I did a camera and the handheld work, and then we brought Ed in as Steadicam operator. But we had the team set up in a way that we could hire a focus puller and a trainee and move people around, and that would enable him to, and a grip, to splinter off and either shoot some beauty shots or establishing shots for us. Or we'd be in a leapfrogging situation, so he'd rig the car while I did an interior scene, but we predominantly shot single camera handheld.
Right.
Predominantly.
Which is, I'm a big fan of a single camera because it
yeah.
And I guess really the other thing is that it's, I mean, again, it's a small intimate story, so it's not like you're necessarily covering hundreds of people off in any one scene. But there's something about the definitive coverage, which it feels like this, and a director that is good for that.
Yes.
In terms of being very, very direct about what they're after.
Yeah.
Go on.
Something interesting, I suppose I should mention as well about Lenny's type of filmmaking and the camera choice and being able to move quickly was the idea of, like, you should never be telling the audience what to think, that they should be allowed a place to read the image and sort of be an active viewer. He calls it active watching, so that we don't decide, we just present and show. And I think, so
I think that comes over. I mean, it doesn't spoon feed it to you, do I? I think that's the thing. Is that it just it gives you a chance. It's something about pace as well, and I think that's what makes this, border on that word that we gets bandied around about being cinematic. And I think that the pace of this feels slightly more cinematic in that it's not all rushy and it's not all explanatory and not everyone's just telling each other what the story is. Which can happen with a lot of TV.
It doesn't feel heavily plot driven. And also that's quite interesting. I heard Lenny talking in an interview about 30-minute episodes, which was something interesting for me when I came to the project, doing serious drama in 30-minute episodes. And I know some people have done it, but it doesn't feel that familiar. And it was interesting hearing him talk about in 30 minutes, there's so much room for tone and mood because you perhaps only have one big plot event. Whereas in an hour of TV, there tends to be much more, knitting and sewing and plotting you need to do. But this format made us kind of make like little films from each window into their world, which was lovely and left loads of room for what we do in visual storytelling and space and pace and all those things.
I think that reads as well because it doesn't feel like a heavy commitment to an hour. It feels like something that you can absorb, and it still feels out. The half an hour is an interesting. You're right. Is that sort of serious drama tends to go to 45, 50 an hour, doesn't it? It feels like it has to be. And then it makes for a very long series because I guess that's the other thing as well is that how long did you shoot for if you were doing half an hour's?
We had, I just looked at it today because I couldn't remember. We had 48 days for block one, so like 8 days an episode, but that did include like traveling to Sligo and sort of working out how we were going to approach the intimacy, which we decided not to put any sort of time restrictions on. That first time we did it would just take as long as it took, and so it was good in terms of having not feeling totally bash all the time, but it was definitely the right amount of time for that.
Which sounds like you almost had as much time to make it like 50-minute episodes, but to do half an hour's.
Yes, yeah,
Almost.
almost like there was a lot of complications because of the amount of scenes, so like moves in the day and things like that to make it all work. It wasn't completely generous, but it was good schedule, right? The right amount of time we needed. Of course, we'll always want more, won't we?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Of course, it's never enough time. But then maybe there's always an argument as well about timing. Forces you. You know, we all need kind of restrictions and parameters to give us a framework to. Otherwise, I would just keep
go on all day,
tweaking lights until it got too dark.
I suppose it was well scheduled, you know, and I guess that also comes from the production company being really familiar with the director. You know, they've worked together since forever. I think they've produced most of Lenny's work. So yeah, nice, good that's
a good thing, working together. Which takes me actually to your team. How big was your team, and because you shot in Ireland, all on location in Ireland?
Yeah.
Was it your usual team?
A good few new people, and people I hadn't seen for a while, but my focus puller Andrew Riley I've worked with a lot over the years, kind of in and out. He's got, you know, big career. He works with Robbie Ryan a lot, and so he's not always available, but when he is, we try and work together. And he's like, I've known him since I was making shorts years ago, and he's wonderful. And I guess for me, it was I knew how hard the focus was going to be straight away. I knew I was going to be operating, and I knew it had to be invisible. And like, he's such a story-driven focus puller. Like he's in the scene. He's not thinking about the focus. He's thinking about the scene. And so I was absolutely adamant that I wanted him. And it turned out production loved him, and he'd done The Favourite for Element and all that. So that was wonderful that we could get him. And then his loader was new to me, but Andrew knew him well, and they turned out to be great. The whole camera department were wonderful. Ed, I knew a little bit from London, Ed Clark, the Steadicam op. And I knew a lot of his close friends and peers, like Joe Russell, and I sort of knew the crowd quite well. So I was delighted to get him, and he was hard to get because, you know, it was a long time in Ireland and not operating every shot and all of that sort of thing. But thank God we had him, and I really, really love his work in the show. Like, he makes it, and he's such a beautiful operator and lovely personality. And then Garrett the Gaffer was new to me, and it was a production suggestion. And I met him and liked him, and Lenny knew him because he'd worked on, I think he'd worked on Garage, or anyway, they'd worked together and recommended him. So then I met him, and really liked him. And I was, you know, it's always interesting, that conversation I have with gaffers at the beginning, where I kind of say, well, I'm not going to bring in sky panels or floor lights. And if I do, it'll only be in the evening, and it will just be wagon trains, and we need to make those. And it's always, and he didn't kind of bat an eyelid with that. And, you know, he really understood what I was trying to do and keep the equipment out and go as naturalistic as possible. And he was great, like, because we had many lighting challenges in terms of the time of day. Like, pretty much we could only shoot till 11 p.m. Maybe one day in Trinity we got till 11:30 because of rules in Ireland and unions and turnarounds and all sorts of things. But it was the hottest summer really I've known in Ireland for ages, and it wasn't getting dark till sort of 10:45 some nights, and we'd have maybe 1.5 pages of night to try and do. And, you know, again, a really pragmatic director. He understood what my problems were, and therefore we had to shoot at the wall while it was light, and I had to, you know, put a 12 by up and then cheat tungsten, and then we had to turn around at this time, and we had to be on the wide shot at that time. But it really worked. And Gareth came up with some lovely ideas for the interiors, where we had like, I'd use 8x4 acrylic frames, or cut to the window size of acrylic frames at different densities to sort of play evening or night for day. And we couldn't get acrylic frames made in the time scale we had. So he did some great things of, you know, custom making frames with different NDs, and they were very invisible in the swapping on and off of those as the light dropped, and the practicals coming up, and keeping everything the right color temperature, because with tungsten, you know, that's ever changing. So yeah, he was brilliant.
Cool.
Long
That's
answer
very
to
good.
a short question.
Let's look at some pictures. I mean, we've got tons to look at. This is great. Let's just go full screen. So some of these are obviously, these are things that are not necessarily production stills, but they're rather beautiful little intimations.
That's one of Enda's, yeah. Love
Right.
it. Photography.
Um,
Loads of these are Enda's, in fact.
oh, right. Okay, cool. So this is almost from the very beginning. I mean, I went through the whole 12 episodes. So there's lots to look at, but I think hopefully I kind of picked out some kind of what kept leaping out to me really was about the intimacy and about the portraiture and then about the composition and the lighting around that, I think, which was just so, it was so intense. I mean, this is that kind of that depth of field and the proximity, it's kind of wide and close, which I really, really loved. And then, like I said, as soon as you mentioned the idea of Nan Goldin, and then and then having thought about these stills, it's all it's screaming that the reference, which is fantastic,
Oh, great.
And you mentioned the car work. I've recently very gone off process trailers because they are time thieves, as you say. They're and it's always just almost next to impossible. But did you were these were self drives as well then, were they? So they were hook mounts and
actor driving. Always a closed road. Locations were brilliant on this, actually. I should mention that, like really brilliant locations team, and always closed roads. And then so when we needed it, we'd do a front mount, bonnet mount. And then perhaps close-ups, sort of depending on the eye line, but usually off eye line because he was driving. But the majority of our car stuff was backseat, inside the car, rake, French. Yeah. Oh.
Just the isolation is just, and then that's the almost intimacy is just great. You can feel the tension in these.
Amazing how young they look. I can't.
Yeah. When was the shoot then? How long ago was it?
It was. We started in, I think, end of May 19, and there was shooting right up till a little bit of Swedish stuff happened in March this year, but I finished in August.
Oh, well, you were still They were still principal in March. Wow.
A little stuff they couldn't do earlier, that they couldn't go to Sweden. I think it was too much snow, so that was done recently.
Too much snow. It's always the way.
Always.
I mean, we can. I just love these the just the little tiny vignettes of intimacy. It's just beautiful.
I guess that thing with the K35s is very visible in all those shots where you just, I was using milkiness instead of fill, I suppose, and using it as the fill. Like here, you can see it. Yeah. So
this is a night car interior, and this was process work as well, was it?
Sorry, so this is on our last day. This was a scene that kind of, those scenes that follow you around a bit, you miss it for whatever reason, and then so this was the very last day in a shed somewhere in Dublin, that we did Poor Man's Process. And so,
okay, cool. You sent me a video of this, didn't you? Let's try and make that work, because that it might just. Let me just get that. See if I can open that in. Let's see if QuickTime will work. Oh, hang on. Stand by, caller. Your call is important to us. Hang on a sec. Let's see if we can make that work. Can you see that?
Yep.
Can you see that? Okay, let's try and make that. Oh, where is it? That one. This one. Let's see if this works, because this was a bit.
So that's Lenny rehearsing.
It's a bit jaggy, so apologies for that.
And I guess you can just see the chase. So it's Asteria tubes, and then Mark the mirror box, nice sturdy mirror box. And I think I think the car's on skates, and we're shaking it.
Right.
And then I'd imagine that on the take there would have been someone in front of that sky panel doing silly
Jazz hands.
jazz hands.
Jazz hands.
That's the poor focus puller, Andrew. That's his usual face after a take.
Well, I mean, I apologise for the jitteriness of that. It's not what it's like in real life, but I think we can just step through. You just get to see the idea that, I mean, that's what I've done this a couple of times now with those tubes. It's a godsend to be able to program those so quickly, to be able to do that, and obviously having the rain on the windows just gives that little bit of depth, and that picks up the highlights, which is just, you know.
And I think we also had like a 300, you know, right at her eye height with the doors off on a dimmer that someone brought up and down a little bit for a flare lamp, just as we, you know.
Yeah. And then a bit of the car in front's brake lights.
Yeah.
Awesome stuff.
Yeah.
So simple.
First AD, Darren.
Well, let's look at, there's more. We'll jump back into these pictures because there's loads to see. It's just gazillions. Hopefully you sent us some behind the scenes stuff, so hopefully we can see the lighting setups against the scenes in the film, which is always great to look at. Is preview going to open? Here it comes. It's coming. There we go. Okay. Is it going to populate? There we go. Right. Let's there we go. Oh, give it a second because I think it's my cloud is struggling. So what you shot in May, is that right? Did you struggle with times of day? But you had to. Did you do much day for night shooting? Did you have to for interiors and
for interiors? Yeah, yes. So we did either. I mean, they tried as much as possible to shift it into evening for evening because, first of all, the Marianne's house in Sligo is all big windows, and you just want to see out. And I think a large part of the realism comes from the, you know, just being able to see the world out the windows. So we used a lot of, like, they'd let me I could say to Dara, look, I need the sun off those buildings, and then we'll use the ND in the windows for certain day for nights. And then if we did have to flat black, it was more in Dublin, in those busier sort of dinner parties in Marianne's Dublin house, and then I would just flat black from the outside, so at least I'd get all the reflections of the practicals, the candles, so it felt like there was depth somewhere, because I hate just flat windows like everybody. Yeah.
So this is still when we're before they've gone to university.
Yeah. Oh, that's when he makes a balls of it.
Yeah. I mean, it starts to get you kind of screaming and shouting at him.
Yeah, totally throwing things at the TV. Like, it felt like that on the day. You're like, Connell, just what are you after? Like, I definitely felt like that. Yeah.
This is a great shot. I mean, just the fact that we can see that what you did with this. I mean, it's very simple. It's not an easy space to do much with at speed.
You know, I had quite a lot of nightmares about that because, you know, in the school we were going for this light and airy thing, and I was so dependent on the natural light. You know, could always put in the contrast from a big source far away, but the fill was usually natural light and just thinking about where the sun was. And here, every window except the tiny bit of one that's in shot is painted with black paint everywhere. That was basically a black box, and it was like I was really worried about it but not being as naturalistic as the rest of the material. And yeah, I would have liked to make a hole in the wall there, and would have been happy, but that wasn't going to happen.
The other thing, I guess, even if you've got a gantry, if you've got rigging points up here, you could have hung something, but then you're into it's a whole number for rigging and getting machinery and access and all sorts of stuff.
And also, this space was where we built Connell's bedroom. So I think they had to get that out like over the weekend so that we could do this on the Monday. Or I think. So
was that you didn't? So you didn't shoot on any stages at all?
No. So the only set we did in my block was Connell's bedroom. That we put in here. Which was great, actually, because I just loved that it could be rigging while we were working in the school, and we could, you know, pop in on lunchtime or wrap and think about how we were going to, use the space. It was there for them to rehearse if they wanted it.
Right.
I love trying to just contain stuff so that you can keep an eye on things and everything's accessible for as long as possible as the unit is there. And yeah.
Yes, that's smart. That's good stuff.
Oh, Dublin.
Yeah. I love that. I mean, that's just, it's, oh, is it going to go back? Oh, there it is. Just a single source. Love that.
Yeah.
Beautiful stuff.
Indeed, I think, and green. They're tiny little shelling things. It's an amazing pub we shot in Sligo. I mean,
that wasn't a set.
The roof, look at the roof, and the brother and sister that own it. Yeah, fascinating couple and amazing pub. Yeah, it's like a museum.
So this is a good example. You sent me some behind the scenes of this. This was at Trinity College, right? And it was you had to shoot day for dusk. Is that right?
Yes. Well, it all was meant to be night, so we went for it all being kind of dusk. So a summer evening, and we had to start at, in full sunlight and shoot till 11. Yeah. And maybe
so you can see here that we can cue this up. You can see here there's a bit of, you always have to make that split with dusk, don't you? With dusk and dawn, you kind of have to take that convincing split with a bit of tungsten and a bit of daylight, and then balancing that out, so it evokes that feeling of it not being one or the other.
Yeah.
So there's a little bit of tungsten there on his hair, and then obviously you mentioned that the reverses were done later on.
Later. Like I think the reverses and then them walking in. And that was the order. And the other thing with the tungsten split as well was trying to get sources to reflect in the windows as well. So, which I think
it feels like the world is bigger than it really is. Yes. And then this was the setup. So this was it's clearly very daytime there.
Very daytime. I think the next image, so I think this is where people thought I was bananas, having the bulb just floating, and that bulb so it's hitting Connell a little bit and her shoulder, but it's putting a reflection in all those windows of a tungsten source, which then when you turn around matches. But I just think it looks very funny for a nice exterior setup. They're there for the Steadicam.
It couldn't be simpler. I love it.
Yeah. Really. And again, these are very simple. Like,
there's a bit where whether that was a device or whether something that you played with quite a lot. It's just there's the intimacy when the eye lines come in very tight between them, and so it kind of it gradually gets tighter and tighter. But then there's bits where and it might happen quite suddenly in a scene. It doesn't feel just like coverage, but it pops out, and we go into a 90-degree, or the eye line widens when they're missing each other.
Yes. Yeah.
I don't know if that was it. Felt like
very much so. And like that all came out of a dialogue as we were making it. So like Lenny and myself watching the stuff together, looking for stills, and then we'd speak the night before, often just in text message, and be like, and then we'd say, oh well, maybe we should play with the eye line a bit, or it was planned.
So this is a scene. I've done this back to front. This is the sort of post dinner party, or the dinner party scene, and you can just see there what you've done. Is that a flat black?
That is a flat black, yeah.
Right, cool. But exterior flat black, so you've got flat reflections black, that you say,
which was a pain because of course it's not on the ground floor, but it makes everything from just those tiny bits of reflections are everything. And then I think that's a springboard, but we usually use wagon trains, but I think I probably needed more spread.
Is there something, and there's something tucked down between, just on the right?
Oh, there, yes, right, the wagon train. So that would be like a 2-bulb wagon train, homemade, with like 3mm Depron, and they were a bit unwieldy. I don't think the Sparks loved them, because it'll always be bits sticking out and black wrap and all the rest. And then I guess on the prac there, I think I've got either black wrap or gel, or because I think she gets up and walks out, so I probably. I just see a little clip on the side, and that's pretty much it. So like just trying to go all from behind and as small and dinky as
and then this is the scene, so you can tell there obviously that's whether that's a phone picture, but it's it kind of gives you the idea of the colors that you were working at, and then I guess that's the tidy up in the DI.
Yeah.
And then
I pretty much also shoot like largely at 4,300, and then so I have to be careful with my wagon trains, not dimming them, and taking bulbs out and having enough that it doesn't look sourcey if you remove some bulbs, and having a good selection of 160 40s and all of that stuff as well.
So you shoot at 4,300 as a rule, almost
broadly per day as well. Broadly, like not always, but I'm pretty sure most of this would be 4.3, 4.7, or maybe 4,100, 3.9, but all in that area. Yeah.
Why is that?
Because I use tungsten, I think, for daylight work, and yeah, I really like what it does combined with my LUT to the blue end of the palette, and I think it helps keep the reds from popping too much, and it just works for me with my LUT and tungsten.
Keeps daylight cooler and tungsten warmer. I'm a big fan of warm interior lights.
I like the fall off cool and the skin tone holding its natural color, kind of. So it helps with that. If you get magnolia boards and then tungsten.
Yeah. Cool. These are just some more, just because this is a montage, I think, isn't it? It's some great frames and some beautiful, like you said, it's not really very little fill off the key, the big window key there.
Yeah.
Oh. And then just these sort of single intimate phone conversations. That's just, I mean, the coverage was very elegant. It was very stripped down. Was that a real something that obviously came from Lenny?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I think we sort of knew we didn't need loads of coverage, just the right coverage. And yeah, I think he absolutely knows what he needs to shoot a scene. That's interesting on that top shot, because we decided in our language never to go to God's eye view ever with Connell and Marianne, but now she's in bed with Sebastian, Garrett in the story, and so that was when we chose to come out of that very intimate portrayal of love and sex and go to this colder, what we saw as objective camouflage.
Hangover. That's how. Yes.
Yeah.
Looks like Hangover.
Yeah.
Again, the simplicity of that, and there not being a whole great deal of coverage in that. That was the threesome scene, I think, wasn't it?
Oh, I should say about that as well. I usually carry a set of low con filters, and I don't use diffusion, certainly on K35s, but occasionally, and perhaps this is a shot that I use it. I don't know how often I use them, but I always have a look at one maybe in a situation like this, and I may or may not have used it. I'd have to check the notes, but just to fill in a little bit the fall off being quite so hard.
In terms of dailies, I mean, if you're operating, it's sort of trickier to be monitoring with your DIT necessarily. How did you work that out?
So the DIT, we had a really great DIT called Sean Leonard, and
I know Sean.
Yeah, you see, that's how. But basically, and he was, I think he came with me to the post house when we designed the LUT. So I tried to involve them straight away. And then, of course, the first week is like tweaking and finding our feet. And then I kind of just don't have to go and see him anymore unless there's a problem. And, he really came on board with the look and the LUT and was brilliant. And yeah, just knew when to tweak. And really it was just to make, we didn't do a lot of tweaking broadly to the LUT, and even when we went into the grey, but it was just to make it invisible in the edit, or if they wanted something a bit different, or if it didn't go with a scene before or after. But there wasn't a huge amount of changing it.
Again, a beautiful, just a bit of shadows. How is it seeing these back in isolation? You sound like, you sound nostalgic. I mean, how was it?
Like the opposite of social distancing, the whole show,
yes.
Isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. It really is.
And also, I guess I so much like fell in love with the story, and you know, it's set in the west of Ireland. My family's from the west, and it just rang so true. And then seeing these two, you know, what the actors did with it, and I just adore their story. It became very real as the person filming it. You know, I really was rooting for them.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's really part, especially with a project like this, is that it's so intimate, and you really go on the journey with people, and that's filmmaking for me. You know, is taking part in the story almost. So as, especially if you're operating, you're kind of witness, or you're almost a character who's observing. It's such close quarters. Did you feel like that? I mean,
totally. Like, I think there was moments where like I shed a tear when I was operating, like really. And it was that thing of like, it felt like I could feel Paul's heartbeat, or like, you know, when he blushed, I was like, or when it's awkward, like the first kiss, and then they're both laughing. It was really hard not to be like moving the camera in any way, because you felt it. I guess like when you're watching it, you feel it. So yeah, I felt hugely privileged to be watching this thing take shape, I guess, and be a part of it, and also to be allowed to be free with the camera. You know, Lenny was such a great director and let me in the collaboration a bit, that I wasn't afraid to reach or move while I was operating, and that's really special. That gives it a freedom and you know, you're able to move to the place you think is right.
Did you it was blocked with the actors, but then you're obviously giving them as much space to move around if you're keeping as much stuff off the floor as possible?
Absolutely. But again, like that would come from, I'd go to the set, Lenny would come, the two of us would just be in the space. He'd be like, is there a way you like shooting? You know, he's wonderful. And you like, well, I really like it towards the window. Marianne look cool here. But that might change. It might not. He'll try and get it to that place. And if not, you know, it's fine with me. But he's very pragmatic in letting everyone have what they need to do the best they can do, which is amazing and wonderful.
Yeah, well, absolutely. It sounds like a dream thing, really, to the fact that you're making those things. It
was a total dream job for me. Yeah, I loved it so much. Yeah.
So you said, is this going into the second block now?
So this is now Kate McCullough's work. So she did 7 to 12 with a UK director called Hetty MacDonald, who you might know. And she, so they did block episode 7 to 12.
And how did you hand over to that? How does that work?
Well, when I was on board, Hetty had already been hired and they were looking at DPs, and then I think there was some interviews, and I was delighted Kate got it. And then during their prep, I think started officially when we started shooting. So they had access to all the dailies, and they came to set. I met Kate for a few beers and chatted, but really, I guess it was just being there for what they wanted, or if they had any questions, but also making it feel like they could just take the reins and go for it. And, you know, their material's different. The story goes a lot darker, that our characters grow up a bit. So yeah, it felt, you know, I would have done the whole thing if I could, but that was never, actually, I was lucky to do 6, because initially it was going to be 3 blocks of 4. When I first got the project, I think due to Lenny's availability and so forth, and then it got moved that he was doing 6 episodes. So I felt lucky to be doing 6, and I loved it, and it was hard to hand over because I enjoyed it. But it was, I was delighted for them that they got to take it.
Did they make any major changes? I mean, I guess, like you said, it's an opportunity, because the narrative changes and people grow up and they go to different places, that it gives them an opportunity to change the elements of the flavour. But ideally, you know, it still needs to hold. You know, there's still, you've kind of set up a show look. Did they change any? Did they change the kit, or did they?
Yeah, oh gosh, sorry. They shot a lot more 2 cameras, so they hired a full-time B team, and I think that's the way Hetty likes to work. And maybe yeah, I think that's her kind of working method. And then they got some additional lenses, because with the K35 we were jumping from 35 to 55 mil, and I think that they were worried about some of the spaces, specifically in Italy, so they filled in the gaps with some other lenses.
Oh yes, the world gets big all of a sudden. We jump out to Italy very briefly. You didn't
very
do
jealous of Italy. Yeah, very jealous. Yeah. Oh, gorgeous. Yeah, I didn't do this.
It's beautiful, but I didn't do it.
It's beautiful. Yeah. Oh, I love this.
Oh,
yeah.
There we go. And then we get into that.
And it's that view, and oh gosh. Yeah. It's when they're full.
But it is, I mean, when you talk about it in that language of being objective, and it's not, this is not them at their best, you know.
No, not at all. Yeah, so it works really well, and also shadows her bad sex she had with Gareth in our episodes.
Oh yes, and then Sweden, of course.
Yeah. Oh, beautiful.
So did you shoot any of Sweden?
Yes, I did. Because of, I did a good bit of the exteriors in Sweden with Lenny, because they were in the edit, and so we did that section. It swapped around a little bit, and that was amazing. We're in the north, where we were in this place called Luleå, where it's a sort of islet that basically you can be in the town and see a frozen sea on either side of you, and the sea is completely frozen, and that's what she's walking on.
Right.
Wow.
Yeah,
it was amazing. Yeah. Oh. Mm-hmm.
Back to a single bed.
Yeah. I didn't work with that actress at all, Helen.
Really?
Yeah.
I love that you're so involved. It's such a personal story. It's great. I mean, the composition of this, because I don't think he moves from this position. It's that screams that kind of Nan Goldin authentic, doesn't it? I love that.
And I like it as well, because in episode 2, when he breaks up with her, and she just turns around on the bed and it's the same blocking, but her back is to camera, and she just won't let anything in. Yeah, it's nice. Oh.
That's a Nan Goldin shot, surely.
Great, isn't it?
And then there's some shots behind this. So this is a bit where he finally approaches her in public almost. It's
that's someone I haven't talked about, actually. Our wonderful grip Oisin built this for us.
Right. Well, this is brilliant. Tell us about this.
Dolly. Yeah. I don't know if you got a closer shot of it, but you know, the water bottles create the ballast. So you just fill it up with water or juice it. And that's Ed Clark there in the water. And that's how we did those.
I love that.
Yeah, it's really fun. Poor
going backwards,
because I think he didn't realize how handheld the project was going to be at the beginning. And, you know, we even laid a couple of tracks, and then we're like, nah. I think we shot one tracking shot on my block when he goes into the school, but it's very with him, you know, side profile, moving with the actor kind of thing. So he was, a little bit bored.
That's great. That's DIY filmmaking right there. I love it.
Yeah, brilliant. We called it the water dolly.
Water dolly, I love that. You should you get your name printed on that.
Or his name.
So this is
Kate's work as well.
Yeah. So we're back to, I mean, it's almost a direct Nan Goldin reference there, back to the single bed. This is towards the end of the series. Again, great. This is almost a Todd hideout, isn't it?
Yeah,
the interior. No, mum. And then the final scene. We leap to the final scene, which is just, its simplicity of that is just amazing.
Ending, yeah. Oh.
And then see, they are friends.
They were great for each other, actually, in terms of support, and just brilliant together. Yeah. Oh, look, there's Lenny on the right, sitting down. And all the
That's
yeah.
you kept doing all the heavy lifting there. Excellent.
Yeah. It was super light, my camera, actually. I take everything off and just have the, essentials. So it was because I'd done on dark materials, I'd done the LF for like however many weeks. And, also it was just getting used to the size of the camera, like, not hitting an actor in the head when you turn around with, because the back end is bigger. So I just felt so light coming from that.
It's always good to have having a second AC, which is always
actually, I must say that whole time we were shooting, Paul and Daisy, Paul got on very well with the focus puller. They got on well with everybody, but Paul kind of took up learning focus pulling in the downtime. So the whole time we were setting or they were waiting, he'd be on the follow focus on the LCS, and he became really good.
There you go.
Daisy did a bit of holding the, we lots of time.
It's a job to do a job swap day.
Yes. Don't know what I'd do though.
Who's this? This is your first AD, is it?
Yes, Dara. Dara Glynn, who's just a bomb. He's great.
And did he work with Lenny before?
No, first time for him as well. But he I think he's only in the last few years transitioned from third to first, but he did the last bit of Game of Thrones last year.
Right.
And so he's, and he's been in the industry since he was very young, and he's great. Very gentle temperament, really.
Lots of support for you, because it sounds like all the team needed to work. So that's important.
And kind of understand how each other was going to do it. And like, this is us in Trinity, and Trinity for
that one
locations. I mean, it's blooming hard to get into. And those libraries we shot in, I think we're definitely the first TV show. And with the Berkeley, potentially the first shoot in there. I think that's the case, which is that Brutalist library, the really amazing one in episode 4 and 5. And, it's very difficult there. They got so many precious things, and you can't put lights in lots of places. It's open to the public. There's a lot of tourists seeing the Book of Kells. And so locations had it hard here, and it was expensive. And they just did a great job of it.
This is Sally and who else is that?
That's Lenny and Sally together. And then Enda. So I probably didn't talk about this earlier. Enda, who was a big reference for us, who Lenny had arranged me to meet early on in prep, and we sort of really bonded over photography. And he's an amazing photographer. He was nominated for the Taylor Wessing Prize last year and became the runner-up. Lenny managed to get him as our stills photographer for the show, which I think is quite unusual for the BBC to hire out of the, the traditional on-set stills. So we had him there with us. So it was incredible that one of the main references was walking around the set, and we spent so much time together.
I hope he approved. I'm sure he did.
He did. I think we're definitely going to work together. Like, we got on really well. He's wonderful, and it was amazing for me to have him there. There's Paul. Oh,
there's a team. Look at that. What a beautiful day.
We're missing Garrett the Gaffer's there on the right in the deep background in the white t-shirt.
Is that him there?
Yeah, he's always messing. Yeah, that's in the pubs. There's Lenny. Yeah, so sometimes, it was like that very, him just looking at my monitor, and I could hear him, and it was a very responsive way to work. That's the Debs. That's funny with this project. Like, when I read it, I never saw Endless Sun. I just didn't think that would ever happen to us, shooting over 2.5 months in Ireland. And I'd say 90% of the days were blazing sun. And I sort of couldn't believe it. And it was like this scene, I think it's scripted in the rain. It felt really overcast, and it's riding and heavy and blazing sunshine. And so it was a challenge.
Well, it turned out terribly well. Let's just jump to say there's a couple of questions. What have we got here? Oh, that's a good one from Kate Reed, BSC. Hello, Kate.
Hi, Kate.
How much rehearsal time did the cast have with Lenny before you began shooting?
Oh, I'm probably not exactly right on this, but I think they were full-time in Ireland. Like Lenny met them a bunch of times, obviously, and they tested together and all of that. But I think the actual practical time on the ground was maybe 8 days, including fittings and all that kind of stuff, maybe 2 weeks. And I think, they were quite relaxed as far as I know, the rehearsal. So we got everything back in where the production offices were. And so he could just rehearse in his office, so it was quite loose, and then they could go off to costume and get fitted. And the way we set up the camera testing, which was a big I'm really into testing, and the way I like to do it is at the production office in the last 2 or 3 days of prep, so that everything and everyone's there. Lenny can be rehearsing, they can pop out in every costume, hopefully have the camera team there so they can continue testing if they're happy to there, but have actors pop in and out through the day, have access to the prop store. Hopefully SFX will be there. Like, we didn't have much SFX on this, and I think props were doing a lot of it, but it was like, steaming windows or raindrops, so we could test all that, introduce the designers and everyone to the LUTs, make sure that was working for everyone, do costume, and then lens and depth of field tests. Like, they were quite on the fly, and we go outside for a handheld walk, but we try Connell in a group scene at different, 2.8, 4, 1.3, all the way to bring up that discussion, what we were talking about earlier in terms of being able to isolate them so there was only each other in the world. So that all came out of a kind of gentle 2-day getting to know each other, them in and out, and us just kind of testing and playing, and me getting a chance to make sure I was going to be tall enough to do the handheld with Paul and all that kind of stuff.
That sounds like a good idea, to be able to mix all of those things and to be able to do it so it works for every department.
Yeah, it's so important for me, and also it just breaks the ice with everybody, like the cast know. And if you can have it, because I don't like when it goes formal in a studio and they come in and they present themselves for their costume test, and for the type of work we were making, trying to keep that as loose as possible, and that people, every department felt like they could just come up and look in the monitor and say, well, is the blue going to be like that, or just to make a place of dialogue more than telling, I guess. Yeah,
there's a limit to how many opinions people can have, but yes, I know what you're saying.
Yes. I mean, the key creatives. Yeah.
I guess the only thing I can hear my folks pullers shouting at me is that, but is a camera trying to prep camera, not at the camera house.
Yeah.
Would so it almost, I totally think it's a brilliant idea, but it almost like you say, it needs to be at the end of camera prep.
And also it has to involve a process that I go to the line producer and go, the way we had 5 days in the higher house, can we go to 6 or 7, or can they do 4.5 there, and then ring the folks, would you mind if it'll be better? And I swear I won't annoy you. And he'd be like, yes, you will. You'll be grabbing the camera every 5 seconds. So I think on this, I think that they just, and I'm pretty sure maybe they had the Friday and the Monday to Wednesday in the higher house, and then they came to us maybe even lunchtime Thursday till Friday, or something like that. Like there was give and take.
Yes.
But yeah, they would have preferred to be at the higher house. And yeah. And actually the other thing was the Friday before we started shooting, which I think was really important for a show like this. When I was working with a new gaffer, Lenny was working with a new DP. We hadn't worked with the first. The Friday, the first location we shot in was Marianne's house in Sligo, so the beautiful house. And we got all elements out there on the Friday. So I think cast came out, we had them for an hour or two and just, shot them in front of the window in the school uniform. Lenny came out, that meant all the monitors could get in, all the cables were out of the way. He could be happy with what, and I could see how he was going to work, what monitors were they really going to stand at. And the actors can feel the space, and I get to play with the lights with the gaffer a bit.
That's a dream thing, isn't it? Having it doesn't happen very rarely, about getting almost and we were always expected to kind of start, when you start hard, there's a hard start, isn't there, on a Monday morning, and everything needs to be up and running, and you've got to develop those relationships really quickly, and it's with cast and with your director, and you might not have worked in in anger before? You know, you've done all the prep and it's all been lovely, but you've not actually got on set. Like you say, where are they going to be with monitors? All of those things. So to be able to get a softer start to that, I think is a real.
And like, I kind of now think I'd lose big stuff to achieve that. Like I'd take off crane days or whatever. It's such an important part. And the pressure becomes so much on that day one, even in terms of what you choose to shoot. If you don't have an easy in and just to break the ice and, you know, yeah.
How many, this is a question from John de Boorman, BSC. Hello, John. I think he's still here. He's, how many pages a day did you shoot? Because I think that's.
Oh, it varied. Like, I think, I'd say it was averaging 4, I guess, 4.5. I think we had days where it was 7 and days where it was 1 7/8, but it felt not like it didn't feel different than the other jobs I've done in terms of page count. And it's interesting because Lenny is a filmmaker as well. He's not he's everything that goes into the edit could be chucked. You know, he really gives himself enough material to be able to, you know, choose what's great. And he's very aware of the process of filming, that you might change or you might not want a scene in, or for whatever reason it doesn't work, and there's enough material to let that happen. Yeah, because it's interesting, like with the big TV I do, sometimes you hear on set like, oh, well, you know, the scripts are 20% too long and we're shooting more material than we need to and we've only got this many days. But then, like, I listened to the Succession BAFTA talk the other day, and he was saying it's so important to have that extra bit in order to make a great show, because then you can truly edit and get rid of the things that don't quite work out. So it made me respect all that more, if I'm saying that in the right way.
It's a question from Catherine Goldschmidt. Hello, Catherine. Katie, in fact. She wondered if for real truthful performances, were the intimate scenes, because actually the intimate scenes tended to come from, you know, either arguments or when they sort of are vulnerable to each other. Were those kind of shot in order? You know, were they you know, you didn't just go, okay, we're just going to shoot a sex scene now. Did it have any that sort of actual emotional preamble to build up into that?
We tried to keep them as close together as possible, but for example, the first intimate scene we did, there was quite the process of figuring out how to do it. And I think we started that on its own on a day at call. I think it was the first thing we did. I think we even dropped a lot of the crew to come in later, I think. And a lot of it was, so the first time there had to be a lot of discussion about approach. How were we going to work? How were we going to find the language? What they were comfortable with? And that's where we put no time restriction on. Outside of that, once we found our feet with it, we did try to keep it as continuous as possible. And Lenny's major note in the shooting for me of those scenes was that it shouldn't feel in any different. It should feel like a continuation of the dialogue. So, you know, there should be no change in the way the camera shoots it or the lens. It is essentially, it's a dialogue between two people, a bit physical. And so it should feel like a true continuation of the dialogue. That was kind of the main important mantra note about how we approach the intimacy.
Did this is a bit of a leap, but had Lenny worked with those lenses before? Because
no,
because it's sort of interesting. It's quite good when it's a director that's obviously very, very visually strong, but can almost knows what lens they want to use. Or is that something that you kind of developed once you demonstrated?
Yeah, like and even that was quite, you know, again, it felt really organic. Like I'd be like, I really love this lens, and then we'd get it on and show it in that test day, and then we'd go for the other one. He'd be like, well, I love that. And it was a continuous dialogue all the time. But more often than not, we were on the 55 or the 35, occasionally the 18. Very occasionally a 65, and that was pretty much it. And then our wide shots in towns when they involved other people, group shots, let's say, were all shot like 75, 100 or 135. Right. So getting as far away as we could, and you know, like for example, that still you showed when after he asks Rachel to the Debs and they're in Tubbercurry in the village, that very compressed wide shot, them in their world, you know, that where he's taken the step into their world at that point.
Yes.
Rachel's world.
Beautiful. Hang on, there's another question. Would you have liked to have shoot in large format, do you think? Do you think it would have made a real difference?
In retrospect, like we totally ended up on the right camera for the show, especially in terms of the speed, and not even, I don't mean speed, like for me, being able to be in the sex scene or not sex scene and being down and just being able to stand up and take 2 steps and get down again and not have to move the dressing and get the camera in and stuff everywhere. Like this, the only bit of footprint we tried to have in the set was our little circle of the, you know, me, the folks, 3 apple boxes, and we kind of had to fit within that. So everything else was, we could move quickly to and shoot. And I think, and also, I don't know how we would have done the Cars large format. I guess we would have got a normal mini for those scenes, which we did on Dark Materials a little bit. And, you know, if we were in tiny spaces, but I think Netflix said we could only do a certain amount of a percentage on the normal format. We couldn't mix, and in that show. So, but in this show, I 100% believe we ended up on the right thing. You know, it finds itself, doesn't it? And it became this thing, and that's heavily reliant on neat, tiny camera, you know, very close focus, shallow depth of field.
Was there any problems at all in terms of where it was ending up? Because obviously there's with some you know, streamers that there's a requirement for 4K or for we were originally BBC 3 totally when I came on board, and then Hulu came in later, and there was nothing from them, and I think even the running time was allowed to be anything between 26 and 33. I don't know if that was originally the case, and then, but yeah. So I think it was, yeah, no problems from my end on that. Yeah. And just to the grade, how much work did you obviously how much of the grade did you get to do?
I got to do 2 sessions with Gary, and I wasn't there for the main day. So basically, then he's so great, you know, like he'd let me, I was on another job and he'd let me come in on a Sunday and take up his whole Sunday, and we would set key shots for every scene. And then, or we'd just get into a bit of it, and then he got to know it. And he's done all of Lenny's films for ages, if not forever. And so he really, and I think myself and Lenny were quite together on how it was going to be right from the LUT to the, so yeah, I felt like it was okay not to be there. I wasn't pulling my hair out or super worried about it. And yeah, I think he's got a really gentle touch, and because we had the one LUT that he designed, and you know, that was based on tests of the people with the clothes in the actual spaces. Yeah, it was okay for me not to. I would have preferred to be there, but it was okay for me not to be there for all of it.
Well, it sounds like it was so defined up front, so you kind of did all that work that actually a lot of it took care of itself in the into post. Was there much VFX work, and did Lenny obviously then have in terms of the grade, did he
like he would have been there for every bit of grade and sound. And interestingly, I think they finished a lot of the sound for the very end stuff in lockdown. So I think they did some sound mixing certainly for block 2, and I think a bit for block 1 in full, you know, where they had to bring the gear to the people's houses and do it all by Zoom. So it's amazing they got it finished, really. Yeah, and yeah, he's all over it, you know, like he really is. Yeah.
Cool. So, well, I love the show. I love the writing. I think the honesty and authenticity of it is just it screams out. And I think it sounds like you enjoyed yourself on this show, and it's something that you really fell in love with to take part in, which is it can't be better, I guess.
No, yeah, totally.
So I wanted to say
congratulations for me, which was amazing.
And yes, because you don't live in where do you live?
London.
Live in London.
Yeah, so it was just so special. Yeah.
Brilliant. Wow, what a spring summer to remember.
Yeah.
So yes, congratulations, Suzie Lavelle. That's just beautiful work. Thank you for joining me. What's next for you? Do you know what's coming out of? I mean, none of us know really, I suppose.
No, we're hopefully, well, we're going to do Sally's other book called Conversations with Friends with lots of the same people. So Lenny's doing it, an element. So that's, but I don't know when or how. Or, yeah, I hope it. Yeah, I can't wait to go back to work, but I do think it's going to be a bit different for a while, isn't it? And it's also like having a project like Normal People that, yeah, as I say, was made so intimately. Yeah, it's hard to imagine it in PPE, but let's see.
Wow, yes.
Yeah, we'll adapt. We'll make it work.
Yes,
yeah,
absolutely. Well, thank you again. It's been a pleasure. I hope it's not been too stressful. Appreciate you taking the time. Thank you, Suzie.
Thank you.
Take care.
Okay.
See you soon.
Bye. Take care.